Dylan Hartley. If there was a Hall of Fame for rugby bans, Dylan Hartley would be in the front row, grinning. The man could play, no doubt about it, but he had a gift for trouble. Across his career, he racked up bans adding up to 60 weeks. That's more than a full season sitting on the couch watching his mates play. His rap sheet started early with an 8-week ban for biting Stephen Ferris in a heated match. Then came the big one in 2007 when he was hit with a 26-week suspension for making contact with an opponent's eyes. And just when you thought he might calm down, he'd go and earn himself a few more weeks off with punches, swinging arms, or verbal abuse toward officials. Even his mouth got him banned, once earning a suspension for calling a referee a cheat. The crazy part is that he still managed to become England captain, but his antics meant missing huge events like the Lions tour in 2013. Sadly, every time he seemed ready to turn a new leaf, another incident popped up. So yeah, Hartley didn't just flirt with the rulebook, he tore it up on a regular basis. Kevin Yates. Kevin Yates' name will forever be linked to one bizarre and brutal moment. Back in 1998, playing for Bath against London Scottish, he bit the ear of flanker Simon Fenn. And this wasn't some quick nip either, as Fenn needed stitches afterward. The incident shocked the rugby world and earned Yates a 6-month suspension. That's a long time to sit and think about your diet choices. Now, ear biting isn't exactly common in rugby, so the case stood out even more. He maintained a low profile afterward, but his name still pops up in discussions about the sport's strangest bans. 6 months is harsh, but officials wanted to send a clear message. You can tackle hard, ruck aggressively, even throw the odd punch, but the buffet line stops at your opponent's head. Yates eventually returned to professional rugby and later even represented England, but the shadow of that infamous bite never truly went away. It remains a staple in lists of the game's longest and oddest suspensions. Julien Dupuis. Julien Dupuy's ban came from one of rugby's most disgusting offences. I'm talking about poking the eyes. Yes, in 2009, while playing for Stade Francais, he made contact near the eye of Ulster's Stephen Ferris during a heated Heineken Cup match. Officials handed him a 24-week suspension, later reduced to 23 weeks on appeal, but that's still over 5 months without a game. And yes, the ban hit hard because Dupuis was an important playmaker for his club. Without him, Stade struggled in key fixtures. Eye contact offences are taken seriously because of the risk of serious injury, and this case became a textbook example. The footage made the rounds and drew plenty of criticism. Ferris himself spoke out, saying there was no place for it in the sport. Sure, Dupuis apologised, but the damage was already done. His international prospects took a major hit, and the suspension became the defining moment of his career. For a player known for his skill and creativity, it was a disappointing and avoidable chapter. Justin Harrison was never exactly the shy, quiet type on the field, but his troubles in 2009 had nothing to do with big tackles or line-out steals. That year, the towering Australian lock was playing for Bath when a wild party spiralled into a major scandal. Reports came out that Harrison had admitted to using cocaine during the gathering, and the RFU were quick to step in. They launched an investigation, held hearings, and eventually slapped him with an 8-month ban. But the fallout didn't stop there. Harrison resigned from Bath along with 3 other teammates caught up in the same mess. The club's image took a hit, and so did his career. Fans who once admired his tough style on the pitch were suddenly talking about his life choices instead. For a player who'd represented Australia in multiple Rugby World Cups, it was a hard fall from grace. However, Harrison didn't disappear entirely though. After serving his ban, he took time to rebuild his image, spending years away from the big spotlight. Eventually, he found a way back into the game as a coach, passing on his experience to younger players. Still, no matter how much time passes, the Bath incident always comes up whenever his name is mentioned. It's the kind of moment that sticks in rugby history, partly because it showed how quickly a respected career could crack, and partly because it was a reminder that rugby's rules off the field are just as strict as the ones enforced on the grass. Jason Cater. In 2005, Jason Cater was playing amateur rugby for Esher in England when a routine drug test came back with a nasty surprise. He tested positive for cocaine, and the initial ban handed down was for 1 year, which is bad enough for any player trying to maintain fitness and form, but things didn't end there. Cater took his case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, arguing that his drink had been spiked and that he had not knowingly taken the drug. The court wasn't convinced. In fact, instead of clearing his name, the whole process backfired. The original 12-month ban was doubled to 2 years, effectively freezing his rugby career for what must have felt like a lifetime in sporting terms, and by the time he was eligible to play again, Opportunities at a higher level had faded, and the momentum of his playing days was gone. What made the situation sting even more was the fact that Keita had been seen as a strong, promising player before the ban, and whether or not his claims were true, the rugby authorities stuck to their stance. The message was clear. The sport wasn't going to go soft on drug cases no matter the circumstances. For Keita, it was a harsh reality check. He became one more name on the list of players who saw their careers derailed almost overnight. It's a reminder that in rugby, one failed test can change everything, and in his case, it did. Dean Richards. Dean Richards is one of the most popular rugby players England ever produced, but his legacy will always carry a dark footnote. After his playing days, Richards moved into coaching, where he enjoyed success with Leicester Tigers and later Harlequins. Unfortunately, during his coaching days, controversy found him with the notorious Bloodgate scandal. The scandal erupted on the 12th of April 2009 during a Heineken Cup quarter-final between Harlequins and Leinster at the Stoop. With Harlequins trailing and chasing a late score, winger Tom Williams faked a blood injury so that specialist kicker Nick Evans could return to the pitch. The fake injury was staged using a blood capsule smuggled onto the field, a move orchestrated under the orders of Richards. However, Williams was caught on camera biting down on the capsule and winking as fake blood spilled from his mouth, which immediately sparked suspicion. The deception was later confirmed in disciplinary hearings, exposing Richards as the mastermind of the plan. The scandal rocked European rugby because it deliberately exploited substitution rules designed for player welfare. Richards was handed a 3-year ban from coaching by the European Rugby Cup, while Tom Williams received a 12-month suspension that was later reduced to 4 months for cooperating. Harlequins were fined £260,000 with £98,000 payable immediately. Club physio Steph Brennan was also banned for 2 years for his role. The fallout destroyed reputations, forced senior resignations, and left an enduring stain on Richards' career, making Bloodgate one of rugby's darkest chapters. Neil Back. Neil Back's name usually pops up when you talk about England's golden generation. He was quick, sharp, and loved by Leicester fans. However, pushing a referee almost left a permanent scar on his career. To his credit, Back has always been upfront about the incident. He admits he, quite rightly, received a 6-month ban after an incident in the 1996 Pilkington Cup final at Twickenham when Leicester Tigers faced Bath. With just minutes left, referee Steve Lander awarded Bath a penalty try after repeated infringements by Leicester near their line. John Callard's conversion sealed a 16-15 victory and gave Bath their 10th cup title. The decision enraged Leicester, and in the chaos that followed, Back broke one of rugby's biggest taboos. He shoved the referee Steve Lander. Immediately afterwards, Back tried to explain that he had mistaken Lander for Bath coach Andy Robinson and insisted the push was accidental. Lander himself seemed willing to defuse the situation, describing the contact as accidental and saying he had no issue with Back. For a moment it looked like the controversy might disappear, but the Rugby Football Union saw the bigger problem. Whatever the referee's view, they could not risk setting a precedent where players could make physical contact with match officials. Back was summoned to a disciplinary hearing, and the outcome was a decisive 6-month suspension. The punishment could easily have derailed his career before he went on to achieve success with Leicester and England, yet Back now reflects on it with a sense of fairness. The ban seemed extremely harsh at the time, but it underlined rugby's absolute rule that referees are untouchable. Troy Flavell. Troy Flavell was one of those classic New Zealand forwards. He was big, physical, and willing to push boundaries. He played with an intensity that made coaches happy and opponents nervous. But in 1997, while turning out for North Harbour against Wellington, he crossed the line and got himself banned for making contact with an opponent's eye. And the incident wasn't in a massive international fixture, which is probably why it isn't as widely remembered today, but at the time, it was a big deal in New Zealand rugby circles. The authorities were cracking down on dangerous play, and eye contact was top of the absolutely not list. Flavell, still a young player making his name, suddenly had his season interrupted and his image questioned. But that's not the worst, as he's also faced separate bans for trampling an opponent's head and breaking another opponent's nose. Yeah, he's wild like that. The thing about Flavell is that he was never shy about the physical side of the game. He thrived in the tight exchanges, using his size and aggression to dominate opponents, but that style carries a risk. One bad move, intentional or not, and you can find yourself in front of a disciplinary panel. That's exactly what happened with his eye gouge ban. The footage showed enough for officials to take action, and Folau had to sit out and watch. And while the length of the ban was limited, the impact was still significant. It cost him valuable match time and slowed his momentum in pushing for a permanent spot in the All Black setup. He did eventually make it to the national side, becoming a regular feature in the early 2000s. Yet, just like with Neil Back, the ban is a permanent footnote in his career story. Just ask rugby fans in New Zealand about Folau, and they'll talk about his bruising runs, his line-out skills, and his fiery competitiveness. Then someone will always add with a smirk, and that time he got banned for eye contact. Unfortunately, it's part of his story now, whether he likes it or not. Israel Folau. Israel Folau's ban was one of the most talked about in modern rugby, not because of a dangerous tackle or foul play, but because of something he put on social media. Folau was a superstar in Australia, capable of turning matches with his speed, power, and aerial skills. He had a long-term contract with Rugby Australia that made him one of the highest paid players in the sport, but in 2019, that all came crashing down. The controversy began when Folau posted a message on Instagram that listed groups of people he believed would end up in hell unless they turned to God. Among the groups he named were those from the LGBTQ community, along with others such as drunkards, liars, and adulterers. He said this was part of his Christian beliefs and stood by it even as the backlash exploded. Rugby Australia saw it differently. They said his post broke the code of conduct he had agreed to, which required players to show respect and uphold the sport's values. Sponsors were furious. The media firestorm grew, and the governing body warned him about the serious consequences. Strangely, Folau refused to take the post down or apologise, saying he was simply expressing his faith. What followed was a high-profile tribunal case that gripped the sporting world. Eventually, his contract was torn up, effectively banning him from playing for the Wallabies or any Australian Super Rugby team. The fallout was huge. Supporters argued it was an issue of free speech, while critics said it was about maintaining an inclusive sport. Folau later moved to play overseas, but his time in Australian rugby was over. His ban became one of the clearest examples of how actions off the field can end a career, even for a player at the very top. Bakkies Botha didn't play rugby, he played demolition derby in a rugby jersey. He was one of the most feared forwards in the modern game who built his reputation on bone-crunching tackles and a refusal to take a backward step. Unfortunately, that style came with a cost. He served an 8-week suspension for eye gouging allegations, and that was just the warm-up. In 2009, he picked up a 3-week ban for striking an opponent, then added 2 more weeks for a dangerous charge in a Lions test, but his most famous moment came in a Tri-Nations match when he decided Jimmy Cowan needed a headbutt. That stunt earned him 9 weeks on the sidelines, and yet South African fans still adored him because he brought an edge to the Springboks. Sure, the bans piled up, but Bakkies never seemed to change his approach. If you faced him, you knew the match would be a war zone. He played big, he hit hard, and he paid the price in suspensions. But to him, that was just rugby done properly. Mohamed Hawass. Mohamed Hawass is a player who made as many headlines for his discipline problems as for his power in the scrum. The French prop had built a reputation as a physical force, but unfortunately that came with a short fuse. In the 2026 Nations, he threw a wild punch at Scotland's Jamie Ritchie and got himself sent off. That moment earned him a 3-week ban, but it wouldn't be his last time in hot water. Fast forward to 2023, and Hawass was at it again. This time, during another Six Nations clash against Scotland, he headbutted an opponent right in front of the referee. Unsurprisingly, the red card came out instantly and the suspension was even longer. It was the kind of move that left fans shaking their heads because it wasn't just costly for him, but for his whole team. But the trouble didn't stop on the pitch. Hawass also faced legal issues off the field that tarnished his image further. His national federation and club had enough and took decisive action to remove him from selection. For a player who had the raw talent to be a long-term international, it was a blow he inflicted on himself. Hawass's story is a reminder of how discipline can make or break a career. Rugby rewards aggression when it's controlled, but it punishes recklessness harshly. He's proof that one too many lapses can close doors that talent alone can't reopen. Richard Lowe. Now, if you want to talk about rugby's most notorious enforcers, Richard Lowe's name comes up almost instantly. The man had a reputation for playing on the very edge, and sometimes way beyond it. In 1992, while playing for Waikato against Otago, Lowe was involved in an incident that landed him a 26-week ban. And you guessed it, his offense was making contact with an opponent's eye area. Now, 26 weeks is not a slap on the wrist. That's half a year out of the game, which in professional sport is a lifetime. It shows just how serious the offense was viewed. But Lowe was no stranger to controversy before this, having been involved in other rough incidents. But this one cemented his image as one of rugby's bad boys. The match itself was a typically physical provincial battle, the kind New Zealand rugby thrives on. Tempers were high, collisions were brutal, and in the middle of it all, Lowe crossed the line. He served the ban, but it didn't exactly mellow his style. He continued to play with the same physical edge, winning caps for the All Blacks and becoming a household name in New Zealand. To his fans, he was the kind of player who would do anything for his team, but to his critics, he was a walking red card waiting to happen. Decades later, Lowe has leaned into the reputation, often speaking openly about his playing style and the incidents that followed him. But that 26-week suspension remains one of the longest in rugby history and a reminder that even the toughest players can't escape the rulebook. It's a chapter that will always be mentioned when talking about his career. If you enjoyed this, there's plenty more rugby videos in the works. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.